Welcome to the revolution.
Professor Bridges, you said several times, you've used a phrase, I want to make sure I understand what you mean by it. You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
So this isn't really a women's rights issue.
We can recognize that this impacts women while also recognizing that it impacts other groups. Those things are not mutually exclusive, Senator Hawley.
Oh, so your view is that the core of this right then is about what?
So I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic, and it opens up trans people to violence by not recognizing them.
Wow, you're saying that I'm opening up people to violence by asking whether or not women are the folks who can have pregnancies?
So I want to note that 1 out of 5 transgender persons have attempted suicide. So I think it's important
because of my line of questioning? So we can't talk about it?
Because denying that trans people exist and pretending not to know that they exist
I'm
is
denying that
dangerous.
trans people exist by asking you if you're talking about women having pregnancies?
Do you believe that men can get pregnant?
No, I don't think women can get
So you are
pregnant.
denying that trans people exist?
And that leads to violence? Is this how you run your classroom? Are students allowed to question you? Or are they
Absolutely.
also treated like this, where
No,
they're
they're
told
allowed
that
to
they're
question.
opening up people to violence?
We have a good
by
time in my
questioning?
class. You should join.
Oh, I bet.
You might learn a lot.
Wow, I would learn a lot. I've learned a lot
I
just in this
know,
exchange.
absolutely.
Extraordinary.
Yep.
I believe she's a Yale law professor or from some sort of prestigious university. This woman gets up there and says basically that talking about trans individuals and the fact that he asked her, you know, what are they? And I guess that's the conversation that I think is interesting to bring up with these people is like, you know, again, I think you should be able to do whatever you want. I don't think the government should infringe upon your right to do anything, but for you to try to force other people to abide by your reality and not their own is not your place to do so, and it's definitely not the government's place to enforce it, or social media companies. But in this case scenario, she asked him, do you think a man can get pregnant? And this guy says, no, I don't think that a man can get pregnant. And she says that he's opening up trans people to violence for saying that men don't get pregnant. It's so bizarre to me, and I maybe touched on this a little bit too much over the last few episodes, but it's just we're in a crazy little clown world right now where, you know, people's reality of the like this has literally only been a conversation for the last 2 years. And to treat somebody that way over a difference in perspective on what you deem to believe your reality is, which is that men can be women and women can be men, and the word is so convoluted of being a man or a woman now that none of it matters. But also it does matter because you have to call them by what they believe themselves to be, or else you're opening them to violence. I think that's a silly argument and a silly conversation. You can play all the mental gymnastics that you want. You can say that, you know, trans people can't have or can have babies. A trans man can have a baby because they're actually a woman and they have biological uteruses and can have children through the uterus, but they believe themselves to be a man, but their body allows them to be a woman physically. And so that changes the reality of whether or not they can have children. I guess that's the argument, right? Let me try that better. The argument is that a woman who is a woman but believes herself to be a man can have a baby as a man because she's no longer a woman because she decides that she's a man, but is now identifying as a man. And a man can identify as a woman, but the man who identifies as a woman can't have a baby because they're actually a man. I just confused myself. So I don't know, maybe. I don't know. It seems like you can say whatever you want. If you want to say that men can have men can have babies, not women. Men can have babies because before they were women, and now they also are a man that has a uterus, and that allows them to have a baby, but they're actually a man. You just have to understand that that's mental gymnastics. You're playing a word game, right? I said this before, gender and genitals have the same root word, which is, if we look it up, I don't think I even discussed this last time. If you look at the actual root word, like the, the Latin of gen, which is where that word derives, that's the derivative of the word, where it comes from. It means something produced, but mainly in modern use, things or causes, or born of, gender, genitals, Latin, born of. Okay, that's the words. Okay, a lot of people think that words are useless and don't mean anything, and they're just sounds, and it's a construct, which in some cases you are correct, but there's a derivative of the word gen. The gen in gender and the gen in genitals have the same derivative Latin meaning, which is born of. You were born of being a man, you were born of being a woman. Whether you would want somebody to call you a man or want somebody to call you a woman, and you want to wear certain types of clothing and, participate in, I don't know, maybe not sports, but other things, I don't care. Do what you want to do. I think everybody should be able to do whatever they want to do when they want to do it. But the fact that you're going to sit here and tell this man that he's opening people up to violence for questioning your line of thinking, which was only developed in the last 2 years as a mainstream ideological perspective, but you want to tell him that he's opening up people to violence because he doesn't agree with you that a man or a woman who identifies as a man is actually a man who can actually have a baby. No, they have a uterus, it's a woman, and that's the reason they can have a baby is because they were born of Latin derivatives, born of the genitals, the gender of being a woman. Now, again, do whatever you want to do. You're a woman who's a man now and a man who wants to be a woman now. Great. Do you. That's awesome. The government shouldn't infringe on that. Nobody should be violent towards you for having that perspective or wanting to pursue your truth or whatever you want to call it. But you can't tell this man that he's inciting violence and causing people to kill themselves because he doesn't believe that a man can have a baby. Because biologically, they cannot. Biologically, a man with a uterus is actually a woman. And a woman who has a penis is actually a man. That's the way the gender works. That's the way the biology works. And the way the biology works is somebody with a uterus can have a baby, and that uterus means that they're born of being a woman. So that line of questioning, and then she gets super snippy with him. Like the fact that you want to be so, if you want, and this is the problem with a lot of the mainstream arguments that people are having that is such mental gymnastics. Because again, I'm of the framework and of the mindset that I'm not going to infringe on you being you. Do you, I don't care, be a fucking cat if you want to be. But don't get pissed off at me if I call you ma'am when we're in a store and I'm being polite by opening the door for you. Whatever, right? Don't be fucking offended when the world, the normal construct, the binary, right? Because gender is actually binary. You're A or you're B. A means you have a penis. B means you have a vagina. And you can't intermingle, right? You can't, eventually, you can have as many surgeries as you want. You still can't have a baby if you're a man, okay? And you can play as many gymnastics as you want mentally, but it doesn't mean that you get to push your ideological perspectives on other people and tell them they're causing violence and making people commit suicide, right? And the actual framework of that argument is so flawed because the amount of people who commit suicide as a result of being trans is not due to somebody telling you they can't have a baby. It's generally due to the fact that the DSM-5 identified gender dysphoria as a mental issue up until, I don't know, they probably changed it in the last 48 hours. But it was a gender dysphoria. It was literally taught to me in psychology the same way. Now, again, you'll find this being actually pushed ideologically in censorship now because Reddit this week just passed new rules and regulations or whatever saying that if you say that somebody who is I think what was it? They use the word groomer or pedophile. If you use the word groomer or pedophile on Reddit today, you can be flagged for hate speech. That is in the new rules and regulations of Reddit that was just passed this week. Right now, they're saying specifically, I think in the article that I was reading, that it could be used for people who are calling people who are trans or gay or whatever as being groomers, but that's not what people are doing when they're assimilating it. They're assimilating it to that because when you go online and you see all of these atrocious videos of these, what are they called? They're not trans. They're, what's the word? Where they go, what's it called? They go get dressed up and they dance all crazy and they put on all makeup, but they're not a woman. They don't identify as woman. What's the word? Guess we can't find it. You know what I'm talking about. I can't believe I can't think of it. But whatever, right? The people who dance, right? Let's see. Maybe one more try. One more try. Drag queens. Thank you. All right, we got somebody. Drag queens. All right. So drag queens is where they go dress up and they do a whole show and they have fun and they dance and it's this like sexual experience and they're like to freely express themselves in a dress when actually they, are a man or whatever. But what we found in the last few months is in these pride parades and things, you're seeing like people topless, dancing and shaking their boobs in front of like young children. You're seeing like these drag queens twerking in front of children at a table for like a pride awareness party at a strip club. Like it's all of this weird little. And there was a video that I saw that I respect highly, this drag queen who came out and said that, drag is a highly sexualized, high intensity, like drug culture. That's what it is. He said, because it's drag, not a trans, he said that he believes that there's no reason that they should be doing this. There's no reason children should be around. Drag is not intended for children. It's a hypersexualized culture that's based on sexuality in some way, shape, or form. And that there's anybody who wants children at these types of events are groomers and are pedophiles, because that's fucking creepy. Why do you want to shake your ass or your boobs in front of a 6-year-old? And if somebody did that to my child on the side of the street, I'm sorry, I'm hitting you for sexually assaulting my child. Very hard. Because that's sexual assault. You don't get to put your boobs in front of a child, regardless of what parade you're at, and then censor people for calling you a groomer. Like in the same way that we talked about Disney, right? The Baymax series that just came out like 2 weeks ago. And you have the trans man who's actually a woman giving input on tampons, but there was no context around it. They didn't tell you it was a trans person. They didn't tell you they used to be a woman and now they're a man. They just had the trans flag on their shirt and said what type of tampons they use and then pushed those episodes to 5, 6, and 7-year-olds because that's what the child side of Disney is about. It's about people who are under the age of 7 because over 7 you get access to all the shows or something like that. So that's what that is. It's grooming. It's the same thing of Disney putting sex in the stars in The Lion King. It's the same thing of the guy having an erection in The Little Mermaid. It's the same thing as it's all grooming. It's all them hypersexualizing our culture from a very young age. And why else would you want to push these things in before sex education, right? I think this is the biggest point that you can make about this. If you want to have a conversation about a trans, gay, lesbian, straight, sex, literally whatever you want to have that's a conversation around sexuality, which has, again, root words, sex in it, it should be done at the age of sex ed or above. You shouldn't have to pass a bill in Florida that gets ridiculed for being the don't say gay bill, when actually in reality what we were saying is don't push your sexual ideology onto our children under the age of 7 or 8 or whatever it was. Yeah, because you don't have sex education until you're in 6th grade. And even when you're in 6th grade and you have that sex education, you have to get a parent consent form in order to be educated by the state and have your child be told about sex by the state. There's a reason that you have to have a parent consent form at 6th grade to learn the biological aspects of sexuality and sex and how your body works. Because some parents don't want that ideology being pushed by the state. They don't want the mainstream narratives around sexuality or whatever this is to be given to them by a teacher who they don't know personally, who may be a fucking creep on their own. They don't want that. And it's completely expected. I don't know who my children's teachers are. So maybe I don't want my sixth grade would be like what, 12? Maybe I don't want my 12-year-old being educated about sex and the different types of sex by a middle-aged creeper ass man who's usually the gym teacher looking at girls in short shorts all day, and that's the only reason he got the job, because he's a creep. You should be able to use the word groomer or pedophile when they're doing something that alludes to them being a groomer or a pedophile. Seems like a pretty straightforward concept, Reddit. But no, they don't want that. Because eventually, the whole point of the little alphabet here, right, what started rightfully as a movement for sexuality and people who are gay and lesbian and bisexual to be able to sexually express themselves however they want without the government intervening in their sex life, which they should absolutely be able to do, get married, whatever, 100% should be able to do that. But once you start throwing the T's and the pluses, eventually along comes the P. And the P stands for pedophile. And that's the exact reason behind all of this to begin with all of their little convoluted acronyms. is eventually the damn list gets so long that if you question pedophilia, you are now questioning gay, lesbian, and bisexuals. The same way that they've jumped on the boat with trans, jumping onto the sexuality movement with gay and bisexuals. And trans is not a sexuality. It is not a sexual preference. It has nothing to do with how you express yourself sexually. And I've seen all of these like liberals of TikTok videos and all of these conversations surrounding like these younger women and men or Z's or Z's, don't know what, Zeus. Talking about, I am, trying to explain their pronouns and trying to explain their sexuality. And they'll say something like, everybody asks me they should address me because I am a gay, queer, bisexual, trans individual who also identifies as a cat who's actually into lamps. It's like, what? What are you? Because that doesn't make any sense. Sexuality is about your sex life. It's not about how you identify your gender. And when you put in the acronyms, the L, the G's, and the B's makes perfect sense next to each other. And Q is just, I don't really get that one. There's another way of reshaping the idea of the first three, but just in a convoluted way where you really don't know. And then the T's have a completely separate category. And eventually, as I said, the whole point is to lead to a P, or what is it? What are they? The MAPS, minor attracted individuals, or a sick ass pedophile is what that is. And that's what they want to put at the end of it. So excuse me as a parent, when you're trying to teach my child sexuality on Disney, when you're trying to teach at 5, 6, 7 years old on the child side of Disney, excuse me when you're trying to teach sexuality in my schools to my 5-year-old. Literally, I drive down the road in my town and every single elementary school has like a trans flag on their little electronic thing. Like, who the hell, what percentage of elementary school kids have gender dysphoria or are trans or, but what they're doing is they're planting seeds, right? They're planting seeds because eventually when you make that idea available, right? Because when you're a child, you have a bubble, right? You have this little bubble that's the world as your parents had made it for you, right? And sometimes that's great and it's happy and you have a great life and it's love and it's happiness and it's fun and it's, challenges and becoming a better person. And sometimes it's abuse and horrific things and abusive households and yelling and scared and like all of these things. So there's a bubble, right? For better or for worse, when you're a child between the ages of even like 0 and probably, I don't know, probably like 14, you're in this bubble of like, really, you don't know how the world works. And the construct of the world has been made up for you by your parents. And to the extent that they want to shield you for better or for worse from the world, right? That's because maybe there is something abusive going on, or the world is abusive and they want to shield you from that. There's a bubble around that individual. There's a bubble around that child. And when you go in with a needle and pop that bubble because you have a specific ideology that you want to push on children, it's wrong, right? And again, if you're not teaching sex education until 6th grade, when they're 12, why should you be able to push a trans gender ideology onto my 5-year-old in elementary school or preschool? And the only reason you would want to do that is because you are grooming them. That is the whole point. I don't know what other way to look at it. So I would like to, let's watch this clip one more time. We'll see what we kind of pick from it, because it was kind of a heated exchange, but I would be interested in to see what I think there was a couple pieces there that I wanted to point out. So this time I'll talk over it and we'll discuss it while it's going on, and I'll pause it. So here we go.
Professor Bridges, you said several times, you've used a phrase, I want to make sure I understand what you mean by it. You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
So this isn't really a women's rights issue.
We can recognize that this impacts women while also recognizing that it impacts other groups. Those things are not mutually exclusive, Senator Hawley.
Oh, so your view is that the core of this right then is about what?
And that's the other problem of the breakdown. It's like if you say that you are a man who identifies as a woman, so now you're a woman. Cool, do your thing. But if you're identifying as a woman, then what are you identifying as categorically? Like, what are you saying that you are? right? Because if a man is a man who identifies as a man, then just identifying as that in the beginning is the only thing that makes it what it is. What are you identifying as? What is this about, right? Is this a women's health issue? Is abortion a women's health issue? It is not a birthing person's health issue. It is a women's health issue, right? And if it's a women's health issue, then it is the identification, or it is the biology of a woman that makes it so, not the identification of being a woman, right? Because a man who says that he's a woman does not have the capability of having a baby because he doesn't have the inner workings of doing so. And again, I've probably harped on this the last 2 months. It's just been in the news so much lately. It's just been such a constant conversation around these things, and it's in so many places between the Senate and Disney and everywhere. But what are you identifying as? And you ask people that is like, okay, I identify as a woman, but I was born a man. Okay. So in identifying as a woman, what is it? Because if I identify as Irish and I'm German, or I'm whatever, South African, and I identify as Irish, what am I identifying as? Well, I'm identifying as being from a certain country. That is the identification. It has to do with where I am saying I am from. There's an identification. Now, when you look at that and you say, okay, you're identifying as Irish, but you are German or you are South African, you're not Irish. You can't identify as that because it's not true. In this reality, you cannot say that. It's not how that works. So when you identify as a woman, what are you saying that you are identifying as? Is there anything else that you can say that as? I identify as even if you say I identify as a liberal, okay, you're identifying with a set of belief systems. You're identifying with a set of beliefs on certain topics, right? Like the fact that, you believe that abortion should be legal and it's not a baby until it's out in the world. And prior to that, whatever happens, happens. You also believe that there should be very large social programs and, whatever comes with being liberal. That is your identification. It is a thing. It is there is substance to what that is. And if you're saying that gender, is just a construct, it's just a belief system, then what do you believe yourself to be? Because then are we going back to the fact that girls play with Barbies and boys play football? Like I thought that's exactly what we were trying to fight. We were trying to fight gender roles, not gender identity, right? So if you're identifying as a woman, but there's no actual classification of identification there, then you're nothing. It doesn't mean anything. You're not saying anything because I'm German. I'm not Irish. I'm not German. I might be a little German, but I'm not fully, but I'm not Irish. So I can't say I'm Irish. So it's like, what are you identifying as? And this is like where the conversation hits a halt. And that's where you get all these emotional responses like we see here. And that's where she gets emotional immediately, because when you try to play mental gymnastics in a world of reality, it just doesn't work out well. And again, do whatever you want to do, call whoever what you want to call them, but you can't force this in a Senate hearing, and you can't make somebody say that a man can have a baby. And that's what she tries to do here. So let's finish this out one last time.
I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic, and it opens up trans people to violence by not recognizing them.
Wow, you're saying that I'm opening up people to violence by asking whether or not women are the folks who can have pregnancies?
So I want to note that 1 out of 5.
You can hear her voice get all shaky. Like she gets so angry and upset in this emotional conversation. He's super just chill. He's like, okay, so you're saying that me questioning what it is that makes a woman is opening them to violence? Me asking a biological scientific question regarding biology is now making people kill themselves? Is that, as a professor, your perspective? And that's what he says is, if I go into your classroom, right, is this how you're going to treat people when they ask questions? And it gets into this little pissing match between, which is crazy to me, because we usually certain levels of political leadership are held to a certain regard, right? And what we've seen is all these little spats between, bureaucrats and law professors and senators, right? It's like, show some respect. Let's have a conversation. Let's have a debate. Let's let the debate be spirited and lively, and you can even throw insults. But let's not say we're killing people with our words, because that's just not what's happening here. So